Welcome to Save the Associations. I'm Sarah Sladek, your host. Save the Associations is all about celebrating and spotlighting the associations that are stepping up in a time of great challenge or change. Whether they are responding to executive orders or modernizing and adapting alongside AI, or making room for the next generation, Gen Z, which now outnumbers the baby boomers in the workforce. In either case, we're focusing on associations who are leading the way in these core areas, taking a moment to share best practices with other associations and celebrate what associations are doing to save themselves from disengagement, decline, or simply falling behind. It's important in a time of change to stay relevant and provide value to members. So thank you for tuning in and for all you're doing to help save the associations. This series is brought to you by XYZ University, a future-focused, next-gen intelligence community building expert. To learn more about XYZ University, please visit xyzuniversity.com. And now, on with the show. All right, welcome to the show, Tom Foley. I'm very excited to have you to talk about DRI and the Young Professional Outreach Initiatives. But why don't we start by you just giving us a brief introduction?
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. Excited to be here and always great to spend time with you. So I'm Tom Foley. I'm the Vice President of Engagement with DRI. We are the largest association of civil defense and in-house counsel.
Well, let's dive in. As the VP of Engagement, I know you have the answer to this question. Engaging the next generation of attorneys, it's a key area of focus for DRI. And let's just start by saying why. Why is that?
Yeah, I think in our case, like many organizations, our workforce has continued to evolve over the years. And the way that lawyers are getting their work done today is much different than it was 5 or 10 years ago, probably even 20 or 30 years ago. And so we're really looking at the different ways that we can engage that new workforce and understand their needs and how they differ from maybe an attorney that is more seasoned, maybe approaching retirement. And there are a lot of differences. And I think one of the biggest things for us to do is continue to listen and understand the needs of the up and coming generations and where they're headed and what their interests are, so that we can meet them maybe in different ways than our members in the past. And how do we continue to serve those members that have been members for a long time, while also understanding the needs of that next generation lawyer and where we can fill the gaps that maybe industry isn't providing today.
Yeah. I want to pause and just say that not many associations have a role with your particular title, VP of Engagement. So in that role, I'm sure you're not just only thinking about the next generation, but all the generations that are members.
Yep.
But how does DRI define engagement? What is your role largely focused on?
Sure. So it's a lot of things, kind of all duties as assigned, I think, in some ways. But I think the key area is obviously membership. That's where a lot of my background has been in the association space. But we do a lot with committees. We have 29 different committees that engage members across all practice areas on the defense side of the legal space. And so that committee involvement, which is really about engagement in the organization, engagement in different practice areas of law. And then we have state and local defense organizations. So in some more organizations that may be chapters. In our case, they're affiliates essentially at the state level, and in some cases at the national level. And so really engaging with those stakeholders more on the state side, whereas our committees are more focused on the practice area side of law that they're involved in. So it's all about how people are engaging with DRI in different channels and how we can bring all of that together and support the broader community that makes up the great DRI community.
Yeah, it's such an important role, and I feel like more associations need to have that. So, we're going to talk a little bit about the Young Lawyers Committee in
Mhm.
particular. But
Definitely.
first of all, I'm curious to know, what are you seeing as some of the challenges or opportunities that Gen Z, today's current aspiring lawyers, what are they facing that maybe some previous generations of attorneys didn't face?
So it's a great question. I think one of the things that comes to mind right off the bat is the generational differences. And you spoke at our leadership conference last year, and one of the things that really stuck out to me was there's the perceptions, and certainly not always correct, but the perception of what a younger attorney might think of the older attorney. And then on the flip side, what the older attorneys may perceive or may think of the younger attorneys. And how do we as an organization help bridge those gaps so that we can help facilitate better interaction, better engagement from a generational standpoint? That's definitely something that we continue to see popping up and coming at us and coming at our members, and a challenge that we see that we can help bridge the gap on, but certainly not one that I think is going away anytime soon, just in terms of
No,
the workforce. Uh,
no,
the second
no.
piece of that, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say absolutely not. It's
Yeah,
not going away. I fully
exactly.
agree with you.
Exactly. I think the second part of that is, and this is more on the industry and where things have come since COVID and kind of where we're heading. But there's two aspects of it: the on-the-job learning. So pre-COVID, a lot of our younger attorneys were in the courtroom with their partners, trying cases or supporting the trying of a case.
Mhm.
Since COVID, a lot of the clients are cutting back their expenses, and so they may not want to pay for those associates to help try the case. And so that on-the-job experience is a challenge for many of our members. And so where do they turn to get that experience, and where can organizations like DRI and other bar associations help fill that gap? I think is a generational challenge that we didn't necessarily see pre-COVID. And the other one that it comes to mind, we hear this more, is that in-office collaboration. There's this perception that Gen Z, the younger generations, don't want to go into the office.
Mhm.
That's when we talk to our members, that's not always the case. And I think, like anything, there's two sides to the story. They want their time in the office to be meaningful. They want their time to be worthwhile if they're going to take the time to go into the office. They want to make sure that the partner is going to be there, or the senior partner is going to be there, that they can engage with, interact with, and learn from, kind of that mentor opportunity. If those folks aren't coming into the office, and I'm a young lawyer, then why do I want to come into the office just to, you know, work from my laptop sitting at my desk? And so I
Right.
think those, making sure, like in the association space, when we're coming into the office, we're having meaningful interactions and making sure that we're helping that next generation of association professionals come along, just like our members would on the legal side of things.
Yeah. So definitely just kind of being aware that the environment is changing for
Exactly.
everybody, but especially for young people who are starting their careers out in this time of total change.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about that Young Lawyers Committee. How is DRI meeting the needs of young attorneys, keeping them engaged, especially in this time of change?
Yeah, so one of the great things that I learned about DRI when I started here, I guess it was 4.5 years ago, was we have a very engaged young lawyers network. Our young lawyers committee is made up of um, young lawyers that are 10 years or less from passing the bar. But in a subset of that, we actually offer discounted membership, about half off, for those in the first 5 years of passing the bar. And we also give them a free registration to one DRI seminar. And so the idea is, we know that the firms aren't investing in that younger generation yet as much as they are. Maybe they're more seasoned attorneys. And so how can we help lift the burden of maybe attending your first DRI program? But from our perspective, that gets them in the door. And so one of the biggest things we hear from our members is, when you come and you get engaged in a program and you get engaged in a committee, it's a lot higher chance for you to then become involved in the organization and support the organization. So we do that very early on by offering discounted dues, but also offering a free registration. And those that take us up on that, it's just great because they get to see DRI in person and get to see that experience. Now that then ties into the committee. This committee is one of the most engaged committees that we have. So we have the steering committee's got, I think it's a little over 100 members of it right now. Our committee sizes vary from a handful of people to, in this case, over 100. And what they do is they try to find a role for anybody that wants to raise their hand. And the
Wow.
cool thing about that is those people can then go back to the firm and say, hey, I'm a member of this steering committee. I'm the vice president of membership or the vice president of engagement, and I need to be able to go to the seminar because I have this role and I need to participate in everything. So they have the added value of going to their firm and saying, I need to be here. Oh, and by the way, they gave me a free certificate to go to the seminar. So there's some obviously travel expenses and everything, but in terms of just the $1,000 burden of registering for an event, obviously goes away then for their first seminar. So it's a great opportunity for us to get them engaged, connect and network with other young lawyers. Maybe there'll be lawyers that are 5 years older than them, so they can have that little mentoring aspect that might come with it. But the other thing that the Young Lawyers Committee really does is it serves as a bridge to our other substantive law committees. So if you want to get more involved in one of our insurance committees or a product liability committee, Young Lawyers helps make those connections, and then you transition on to those other substantive committees, which is a great opportunity for folks to get a feel for DRI, learn from the Young Lawyers Group, and then take on additional leadership opportunities within the organization. So it's a great way to kind of bridge that gap as you're coming out of law school and getting involved in the organization to then getting even more involved in other committees within the organization.
Right. Multiple benefits.
Exactly.
You said it's
Exactly.
the most engaged committee. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think because of the opportunities that we give them, and much like anything, these are hungry and energetic young lawyers that want to build their book of business. They want to grow their presence in the legal space, and why not do it within a community like DRI and a network like our young lawyers, where the more you put into it, and I say this to all of our members, not just young lawyers, but the more you put into your committee involvement to getting involved in DRI, the more you're going to get back out of it. If you just come and you kind of sit in the back of the room and don't really engage with anybody, you're going to take some stuff away, but it's not going to be the same level of return as it is by talking to folks and getting involved in the organization.
Right. Fantastic that you're having success with this. And I'm curious to know, how has the focus on the next generation of attorneys, how's that influenced DRI as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's an important one. Like many organizations, we have members that have been members for many years, and those members are retiring. And so we
Mhm.
always need to be continuing to fill that pipeline and bring in new individuals. Now, there's plenty of folks that are seasoned in their career that may not have had the opportunity to engage in DRI, and so we're always looking to grow that membership segment as well. But in any given year, there's probably 10 to 15, maybe even 20% of our membership that would fall in that young lawyer category of 10 years or less. And so as you're building your kind of presence in the legal space, having a network of DRI members is important for you and obviously important for us as an organization. And so really being able to focus on how we can build resources and build a network for that segment's an important one for us, because they are going to be the next generation of attorneys representing our membership base. And so how do we support them and look for new opportunities to engage them with what their needs are, which may very well be different than those of the attorneys that have been members for 20 years. And so how do we bridge that gap?
Yeah. So much of what you say has a win-win-win.
Hey,
You're
that's exactly
benefiting
right.
the young people, they're learning from the more experienced, and
Yeah.
vice versa, and everyone's getting more connected to the organization, and it's helping the profession. And I
Mhm.
just love that, like that multifaceted community building. It's so important.
Yeah, I agree.
So the name of this show is Save the Associations. I'm curious to know, Tom Foley, what do you consider the top priority for associations right now to make sure they stay relevant and ready for the future and avoid decline and disengagement.
It's in my title, so I kind of have to start with it, but I think engagement is key.
Yeah.
And I think meeting your members where they are is such an important part of that. So listening to your members and understanding what their needs are, and then adapting, whether it's your product offering to meet the needs of your members, or just maybe it's messaging in some cases, and taking existing offerings and making those available and accessible, obviously, for your members. I think, we've done a lot of listening, in particular to our young lawyer segment. We've had some young lawyer panels at some of our recent regional meetings, and one of the things that they say is they're always willing to offer suggestions and their feedback and everything, but they're not necessarily crawling through their emails and looking for DRI emails and news from DRI. But they're still interested in getting information and learning from us, but it's in a different way than maybe our longer term members are used to getting information from us. Looking at Instagram and looking at social media as a way for them to get their news and for them to get their information. It's much different than the member that's looking for the email on Thursday that's going to tell me where I need to be for the upcoming seminar, those types of things. And so really focusing on how we can engage in a meaningful way with that next generation, how we can engage with our members to deliver what they're expecting from associations. I think an interesting thing that I shared with our board a few weeks ago is on the volunteer side of things. The number of members that are volunteering has bounced back since COVID, which is a great number, but the hours that they're spending volunteering is not what it was leading up to COVID. And so as an organization that relies on our members and our volunteers, how can we create those engagement opportunities to keep our members involved and engaged, but doing it in a way that our members are interested in? How can we listen to them and talk to them to find out what those opportunities are? So I think engagement's really the big one for me.
Right. And I love that. You're researching, you're listening, you're willing to modernize, try new things, and as you said, meet people where they're at. So, so key.
And I think
Yeah.
you're not always going to hit a home run.
Yeah.
You're going to try things, and if it doesn't work, then we're going to pivot. And I think that's one of the great things that our board and our leadership is a big proponent of, is how can we continue to build on what we've done for so many years as an organization. And we may stub our toe on some things, and then we're going to pivot and we're going to learn from it, and we're going to
Yeah.
try that next idea that's up and coming, and be agile and willing to do that. But
Yep.
again, doing it with the member and potential member kind of in the forefront.
Love it. Love it. Well, we're going to pivot and do some dance moves, which I know you're so excited about, but I end these videos with just a little dancing because Tom told me ahead of time, like, I don't really want
Yeah.
to do this, but you're doing it. You're doing
Yeah,
it.
I'm doing it. Yeah, I can't stand up though. My camera doesn't go that high,
Oh,
so it's
that's
gonna have to
okay.
be a
That's
bit of a
okay.
chair dance.
Yes.
That's fine. Yes. Yes.
We got to take a moment to celebrate all that DRI is doing,
Yeah.
just innovate and engage that next generation. So thank you so much, Tom, for all you're doing to save the associations.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been a great conversation, and always love chatting with you.
Welcome to the show, Leslie Payne from the American Society of Civil Engineers. It is fun to catch up with you again. It's been a few years since I've seen you, Leslie, but if you would, for our audience, just give a brief introduction. And since our topic is Gen Z, tell us about the many, many programs and efforts ASCE has in regards to young people and students.
I'm Leslie Payne. I'm the Director of Student and Younger Member Programs and Pre-College Outreach at the American Society of Civil Engineers, and I've been here since about 2008, so I've seen a lot of things over the years. Our student program area is something that I've really enjoyed working for. Our students and younger members are largely organized into student chapters. We have 457 of them around the world, and younger member groups, of which we have about 80 that are active. And then we also have individual students and younger members spotted through our sections and branches, basically all of our units. And I would say that ASCE really is working largely to support these young professionals, giving them, information and guidance and tools that they need to build their identity as professionals, I think is one of the key things. And then also to transition them into the workplace. And once they get there, to help them really thrive as young people in young civil engineers. We have several committees that guide these activities and monitor student programs to make sure that the chapters are running well, provide relevant programming for younger members that really hits the key things that they're trying to learn. And then, as I have mentioned before, one of the larger programs that we have is our student symposia, which includes regional competitions, some professional development activities, and they really drive the surge into the championships that we have every year. That the championships are the ASCE Civil Engineering Student Championships. They involve both students and younger members, and between the symposium and the championships, we bring in thousands, hundreds of teams and thousands of students who really have this as an early formative experience with ASCE.
It's absolutely amazing. I think you said 450 student
457. About 100 of them are outside of the US.
Yeah, amazing, amazing, amazing. So obviously, based on everything you just said, engaging the next generation of engineers is a core focus for ASCE. And I'm curious, with the arrival of Gen Z, what is the association doing to really engage today's students? And what has proven to be really successful, but also what's proven to be maybe a little bit more challenging?
So pre-pandemic, I think they were a little bit more looking for, acceptance and tools to align themselves with the organization, to feel safe, to feel comfortable, being in our organization. And afterwards, I think they're kind of stomping all over us. They're picking up all our tools, they're running with them, and they're, really making a name for themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. We hear from young people in our research that if they're joining an association, they really feel, hey, I'm making this very public statement about
Yes.
something I believe in. I
Yep.
affiliate it with my personal brand. And so I
Yep.
want to jump in and get involved.
Right.
Yeah. So it seems that aligns with what you're seeing as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Fascinating. Anything that you find a little bit more challenging or just different in?
Well, I think, related to some of the other questions that you had asked me about previously, they move very quickly. So currently, I think Gen Z has a lot of opportunity to grow, educate themselves, move forward through the use of technology. I mean, it seems everything is at their fingertips. And I find working with some of our younger people, and obviously so, that sometimes they lack patience with people keeping up with how quickly they can move forward, right? And so I think it's really important for us to, keep pace with the things that are going on. There's a lot of technological change out there that's happening, and it's easy to be, sort of overwhelmed as an organization by that, and keep up with some of the things that the students are hoping that we'll do for them.
You're obviously working with a lot of young people. Students and young professionals is a big, big cohort within ASCE. So I'm thinking about people in our audience who might not have many students or young professionals at all. And what would you say is important for them to know about this next generation of members?
It's important to recognize what they can bring to us because they have mastery of this and they're so comfortable with technology. They can layer that comfort and mastery over many of the things that we're trying to do and sort of elevate our game. So I think that's one of the things. But I think it's important that even though we talk about them being super tech savvy, that they are still looking for something more. And it's something that associations can really provide. And that's the personal nature and the humanity, right? It's the core of what we should be doing, and that's engaging them meaningfully. And so if we focus on, I think sometimes it's easy to try and focus on maybe the next shiny thing with young people, like that the app or the Internet of Things or TikTok or, some of those things, and forget about the fact that what we can give to them really is the human piece and the connection piece. I had seen a quote, and I think it was through ASAE, that if you can do it on Zoom, don't do it in a room. Right. So they are accustomed to what they see on a flat screen and by video. And we need to focus on what they need that they're not getting through that world. We need to focus on the contacts, the connections, the mentoring, and all of the human aspects of it. When I see young people together, connecting with one another or connecting with other leaders that are just a little bit ahead of them, the energy level soars and the excitement, is
Oh, yeah.
increased by those sorts of activities. So,
Yes.
sometimes forget about the technology. Don't think that the way to get them and hook them is necessarily on a screen. The way to hook them may be, in a more personal way.
I love that advice because I think when millennials came into the fold, I heard so many associations say things like, well, we need a Facebook page and then
Right.
we'll be able to engage millennials. And now I'm starting to hear, well, we need to be on TikTok and then we'll engage Gen Z. And so what you just said resonates so much that it's not just about that. It's about actually making room for them in the organization. Um, so obviously ASCE has an unwavering focus on next gen members, and it's kind of built into your culture and your values, and it's been a big part of the association for a long, long time. And whenever challenge or change really occurs, I hear from associations that we'll worry about that next gen piece later because we have to address other burning issues and other members. So I'm curious, as we're living through a time of change and challenge right now, what does ASCE do to ensure that the next generation of members is always a priority?
Yeah, and I am really fortunate to be in an organization that puts a lot of emphasis on students and younger members. I mean, they truly recognize and believe that they are the future of the industry and the future of the organization. We do a lot of listening. We have a committee on younger members who shares insights. In fact, there's a pathway now even for a young professional, 35 and under, to be on our board of direction. They are
Great.
considered a committee directly connected with our executive committee of that board. And so the weight that they have and the things that they say is very important to this board. And I think we learn a lot from them. The other piece that we have done recently is one of our recent society presidents wanted to have what he called a student presidential group. And so he stood up a group of students. There's a representative we have 9 regions here in the United States, and we have a 10th region, which encompasses the rest of the world. And there's a representative from every region on this advisory board. And so we call it the student presidential group, and they meet with the presidents on a monthly basis throughout the school year. They connect with one another, and the students themselves will hold listening sessions and then report back to our senior leadership, the things that they're talking about and the things that are most important to them. And some of the pieces, here's a great example. Our leaders thought for sure our students wanted to be voting members of the organization. That was going to be really important. Yet they learned that the students really didn't care about being voting members of the organization. What they care more about is, finding pathways, one, to connect with one another so that they can share their ideas. And so we've made more of an effort to bring these student leaders together with other student leaders so they can learn from each other about the value that they're deriving from the organization and more practical things about how to manage student chapters or how to take advantage of mentoring opportunities, that sort of thing. And so, we continue to listen to them. We've had many of those leaders then pull up into the organization. The students are becoming movers and shakers in their own right, right? And that's been a great way. And now, as they're moving and shaking with the organization, they're doing so with a voice that they feel is valued, and so they're having a great impact. Sort of like people support what they help to create, right? And so if you have young people being involved and they're helping to create the things that are now going out to other young members or other students, there's more of a support system built in to promoting those activities because you've got young people creating what we're putting out there.
Right. I love that. I love that so much. So the name of this show obviously is Save the Association. So I'm curious what your big piece of advice is. What do you think associations should be really focusing on right now and making a priority to make sure they can save their associations from disengagement or decline, and just make sure that their associations are well prepared for the future?
I think it's really important to focus deeply on the things that you do well. And I would argue that the human aspect and the personal aspect, the meaningful engagement that you have with individuals to draw them into your community is timeless, right? It's not going away. So it's very easy to be distracted or focus on your distraction. And you don't want to be distracted. You want to try and tote the line so that you stay focused on things that are meaningful. Now, that being said, you have to change. If students are telling you something different is meaningful, then you have to pivot to what is truly meaningful for them, right? So don't think that tools or technology or those sorts of things are the answer. Listen to people, listen to students, and find out those subtle changes, the changes from wanting to be accepted to using an association as a platform and saying, oh, wow, that's an opportunity because the world has changed for those folks. We want to, bring them in and give them the tools that they need to do that.
Excellent advice. I love it. Yes, so, so, so important. And I admire all that ASCE has done and continues to do to engage that next generation of engineers and prepare them and make them part of the, not only ready for their careers, but make them part of the association and an integral part of the association as members. So I like to end these interviews with a little celebratory dance.
I
Say,
can see that. Okay.
yes, just to say, woohoo, we're doing it. We're thriving in a time of change. We're engaging that next generation. So important. Thank you, Leslie, for being on the show. It was an honor. Welcome to the show, Steve Fox from the American Nurses Association. Steve, would you give a little introduction for our audience and tell us a little bit about Project MZ, now known as Project Next Gen Nurses?
Love to, Sarah. Thank you for inviting me on the show. My name is Steve Fox. I am the Senior Vice President of Member Acquisition, Retention, and Engagement at the American Nurses Association.
And tell us about Project MZ. What started out as Project MZ? It's morphed.
Yes, we started out with a challenge to make sure that our nursing organization was relevant to the next generation of nurses. And knowing that the next generation, in this case, was millennials and Gen Z, we called it Project MZ. And one of the things that we understood was that the challenge was really spot on. It was very important for us to keep an eye on the next generation and not assume that everything from a prior generation works. And so what we decided was we are going to kind of make this evergreen. And so we changed it to next gen because, as people point out, Alpha is on the way, and the challenge of staying relevant will never end.
Yeah. So what started all this?
We got a board challenge, and it was really initially focused on membership, thus my it showing up with me. And it was a challenge was, are younger nurses joiners, are they ready to sign up and be part of our organization? Are there challenges that we didn't face with other generations? Are we relevant to the next generation of nurses? Is membership in A&A relevant? And so the request was to understand that. From that came a year long, at least a year long research effort with a significant amount of data with your great assistance, Sarah, as we leaned on you as a subject matter expert, to understand the next generations, actually to understand the interaction of all generations, as well as what was unique about millennials and Gen Z. And Gen Z is half of them who are nurses have entered the profession, who are going to be nurses, and the other half is still in the journey. But it really got to the point where the critical mass of two generations really became too much to ignore. And the more we dug into it, you did not have to scratch the surface very much to hear the truth, and then learn more and more.
Yeah, nursing's been through a lot, right? Pandemic, there's been workforce challenges, retirement waves. And so it makes sense that ANA would kind of pause and say, all right, what about this next generation? What are their influences? How are we going to engage them as members? But I'm sure also you're kind of looking at how are we engaging them as talent too? And what is the long-term trajectory for the profession? Really important questions. But also you're going through a lot of change right now with all the executive orders, and just healthcare by and large has been through a lot of change, right?
Yes, nurses have always gone through a lot. The last 5 years have been a real roller coaster. COVID, as a healthcare crisis, hit nurses very hard. And then we come out of that, and now we go into today's world with administration impacts on budget, on spending, on healthcare, the fundamental support levers of the healthcare association. It all impacts nurses, and everything we can do is a noble mission.
Yeah, undoubtedly. So throughout this journey to research, learn about young nurses, what is something that you have found that has been successful at engaging young people, and what's maybe been a challenge?
One of the things that you emphasized that we learned is just listening is a big part of understanding, and a big part of engaging. We absolutely had to listen to them, and we had to take seriously their feedback on how they are treated at entering the profession, and what their different perspectives are. And so, the research was extremely helpful. I think our biggest success is the fact that there's a validation that this is a critical project, a validation that this is a perpetual effort. In terms of the challenges, I think one reaction we get, and it's legitimate, we have to keep it in mind, is how do we balance showing an intense concern for the next generation of nurses without further polarizing the generational challenges, without seeming like we're saying, oh, okay, the system is wrong. The system that was set up by one generation or is embraced by one generation is the wrong way to do it. This generation is the only thing we should be talking about. How do we embrace all the generations. How do we plus up our effort on one side without diminishing the reaction to what's still the majority of the population?
And how has this focus on the next gen influenced ANA as a whole?
We are intensely aware, for example, that the communication channels that are preferred by the next generation of nurses, even more for Gen Z, um, are not where we are strongest in, and we need to get much more mobile phone centric. And we have to be present in social media in a much bigger way. We haven't had to really adjust the message. It's really the vehicles and it's kind of the tone, and just being more willing to kind of be to take actions that come across as authentic, because this is a generation that is very sensitive to authentic communication. So that is, I think, the changes that we're trying to do. We're looking at things through a new lens. We're really aware of tracking the generations and the engagement we have in generations. With a big focus on engagement comes a focus on segmentation. And okay, who is engaging? We know one size fits all doesn't work. And so we have a much better understanding of what it takes to get engagement for this audience. And we are trying to apply that, in every project.
So the name of the show is Save the Associations. Curious to know what your advice is. What do you think associations need to really be prioritizing right now to make sure they stay on the up and up, stay relevant, stay valuable, avoid disengagement and decline?
I would say it's really about relevance, which is why I'm so excited to work on the Next Generation project. It's about authenticity and it's about relevance and it's about getting, as I said, to the true mission that you're working on and making a real difference. It's hard to change the world. It's hard to solve some very entrenched problems, but I think what associations need to do is they need to be a little bolder. They need to be a little bit more risk taking. They need to, again, not have a one size fits all solution. In today's economy, it's clear more than any time that membership is a discretionary purchase. And anybody who doesn't think that is wrong. And so, like any discretionary purchase, you've got to earn the money. And associations will earn the money based on the relevance that they have to solve the challenges.
Thank you so much. Because you've been on this show before, that I like to end these interviews with some dance moves because it's kind of heavy. And it's also exciting. We're celebrating all that ANA and other associations are doing to engage that next gen, plan for the future, stay relevant, meaningful. Thank you, Steve, for being on the show and telling us about ANA's projects and priorities to engage the next generation. It is now my honor to welcome Sarah and Kylie from the American Student Dental Association. Would you both just give a brief introduction for our audience?
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. I'm Sarah Murphy, and I am the Director of Membership with the American Student Dental Association. I've been here about 2.5 years. In one of my prior positions, I was with the Academy of General Dentistry. I also got to work in the student space there. So overall, I have been working with dental students for almost 10 years. So love the dental industry and working in the student aspect in particular.
Yeah, fantastic. And Kylie?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Kylie Weller. I am the Senior Manager of Chapter Engagement here at ASDA. I've been with the organization about 4 years, and in one of my prior roles, I worked at DePaul University, also with students who really, want to change the world, and that is one of the things that I love about working with students. In all of my roles, I've had the opportunity to kind of keep at least a little pulse on what's happening in kind of the student atmosphere. So it's great to be here at ASDA. I've really been enjoying my time here and getting to know, especially the student leaders at all of our local chapters. So thanks for having us, Sarah. Looking forward to the
Wonderful.
conversation.
Good. Well, our topic today is all things Gen Z, which I think you're both experts on, having worked exclusively with this generation now for a little while, and they're still moving through dental school and will be here for the next several years. We haven't quite moved over to Gen Alpha yet. So, since we're talking about Gen Z and we have audience members of associations who might not interact with Gen Z very often, what is something about this generation you've observed or realized and just feel it's important to pass along that information to associations?
I think one of the misconceptions about Gen Z is that they want everything to be technology based. And what we're finding is that they really still do want that in-person engagement. ASDA has a chapter at every single dental school in the US and Puerto Rico. So 73 chapters, soon to be 76. There's 3 new dental schools opening this year. And where we find our most engaged members are from our most engaged chapters. So they really are still craving that in-person, face-to-face connection where they can build that sense of community that we've always seen in associations.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Anything to add, Kylie?
Yeah, I would just add that I really think this generation is so passionate, which sometimes comes across as anxiety or anxious. And that's just an interesting kind of layer to add to the work that we're doing with these students and to the work that they're hoping to do in the future. I really think they're ready for any challenge, but sometimes it takes that little bit of extra relationship building and getting to know them to understand, where they're coming from or why they're just feeling the way that they are, reacting in the way that they are. And especially with our members, I think that they really care about their future and about the future of dentistry. So again, that is one of the things that just makes it so fun to work with this particular population.
Oh, absolutely. I recently learned in preparing for our interview that dental school is really, really expensive. And that students are coming out with literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And so that if you talk about things like anxiety and being anxious about their futures, as well as passionate, you got to be passionate, and you also have to be a little bit anxious about some of that coming out of dental school. Any comments on that stat?
Yeah, I think we agree with that. It's over $350,000 worth of debt that they will be taking on. And, in this current climate, that's an added challenge and an extra stress. So, yeah, I don't know if Sarah has something to add, but agree with you.
Yeah, and just to build on that, there's also so many new questions about funding and especially with the bill that was passed last week, how that will pan out for future dental students and for the current dental students. There's just a lot of unknowns right now for them.
Yeah, things keep changing, but that's an interesting dynamic as well. All right, let's talk about ASDA fever. What is ASDA fever? Tell us all about it.
Yeah, you were saying you just kind of know it when you see it, and that's one of both the beauties and the challenges of it. But I think it really comes down to meaningful connections, experiences outside of the classroom that they are able to get through ASDA, being passionate about organized dentistry, about their communities, really that kind of like age-old statement of doing good, great. That is something that we think they get by participating in ASDA. So that's a little bit about what it is, and kind of how you get it is building off of that, right? Like you get it through participation, through engagement. As Sarah was saying, really coming to one of our meetings or getting involved at that local level. It isn't just about virtual or email communications and whatnot. They really get the fever when they are able to come to one of our national meetings or a district meeting. So we're constantly trying to figure out how to replicate that type of experience, right? Because not everyone can come to that kind of meeting or an in-person meeting. So So figuring out how to deliver that at their chapter and at their local level. But again, it's building that community. It's really looking towards the future and to how to give back to their own communities and to the next generation of dental students. Every year they're welcoming a new class onto their campus, and they're saying goodbye to the fourth year class who's off to go into practice. So they're just constantly trying to figure out how to build that community and engagement.
And I maybe should have teed up that question with letting our audience know that this is a phrase that is common in your association. Any idea where that phrase came from and how it was coined or how long it's been around, ASDA fever?
I
It's
don't know.
around a few years.
A long time, yes.
Okay, okay.
Prior
And
to
it's just part of
our
your culture, which is so cool.
Yes, and we started just saying like it's an ASDA fever week. So we've kind of turned it into like an orientation type welcome event or programming that almost all of our chapters do in order to welcome the new class and help let them know what ASDA is all about and what they can gain by being involved.
I love that. ASDA fever. Every association should have a fever, right? And aspire for that.
Every association should, but I will say ASDA is the only place I've seen this sort of passion and energy where you can really call it ASDA fever.
Mm. Why do you think that is? What is it that you do differently?
I honestly don't know if it's something we're doing differently or if it's really just the culture that we have and the membership that we have. They're young adults. They're all going through the same experience together at dental school. They're all passionate, and it's just that combination of factors, I think, really is what contributes to that and makes ASDA what it is.
I love that. Yeah. Well,
Really
whatever it
born,
is, it's great, right?
yeah.
Something to
They're
aspire.
really, they're really like born leaders too, especially the group that we're the closest with who hold leadership positions at their local chapters. Those
Mhm.
are the even, the over the top people. They have more time to give to us in these volunteer roles outside of already being a dental student. They have so many pulls on their time as it is. So it's just so cool to see them also dive into a role like this where they're really developing the skills that they'll need when they're running a practice or when they're working with their patients when they get out of school. So we really try to kind of bridge that gap of what you might not be learning in dental school. You can get some of that by getting involved in ASDA. So I think
Yeah.
that's part of it too. It's people who really want to learn more and again do good great. They're ready to dive into like the roles that ASDA has to offer.
Amazing. So, Sarah, you mentioned that not all associations have this great vibe and energy. And definitely, we hear all the time associations kind of lament that, oh, these student organizations that are student run, they have great passion, great energy, and then they transition out of a student organization into the quote unquote regular adult association, if you will, the adulting association, but there's a drop off. And I'm curious to know, why do you think that occurs? What do you think is the solution?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that go into it, but I really do think that engagement and connection is a huge part of it. And when you're a student member, you're in school together. I mean, our members are seeing each other in class or in clinic every single day, and they're going through this very unique part of their lives together. And so having that and having ASDA be a part of that and having that connection with each other, I think is what keeps them together while they're students. And that is hard to continue once you are out working in a practice or building a practice and you're not as close physically from a location standpoint. You don't have as much time, even though we know dental students are very busy. They're probably even busier once they graduate. So it's just it's the time of their lives that they're going through this. And I think that having that connection and engagement like they do now in dental school, having that once they graduate, I think would help them stay engaged going forward.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's communication and culture. And I think it's very difficult to let them know what the culture will be like in their next organization compared to what they're experiencing now. And it's hard to communicate that. So
Mhm.
again, like Sarah was saying, they're really feeling such a connection to each other, to their school, to their faculty, to the work that they're doing. And then they're jumping into a whole new realm of the professional landscape. And I think it's just very challenging to help them see, in our case, what organized dentistry can look like for them when they do take the
Right.
jump into the professional
Yeah.
association world.
So I think it's those shared experiences and kind of being in an incubator. But I also think, and you tell me if you think I'm wrong, I also think it's when they're in this organization and they're literally running it. It is theirs. And then when they go to another organization, a lot of organizations kind of have that mentality, well, no, you're young, and so you don't have much power or voice. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a layer to it. I think that some of the organizations that we work with do, there's new dentist committees, there are opportunities to get involved, but I think it comes back down to communicating that, letting them know what power they might be able to grab onto. Yeah, they're not going to be the president of the association, right? That's going to be a years long process. But again, that communications, that culture, I think there's something to what you shared there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the major differences is our lifetime membership is 4 years, or 3 years if they go to a 3-year dental school.
Mm,
So they're moving fast. Our entire board of directors turns over everything every single year. So in other organizations where they are not student driven, your membership is the rest of your career. So you have time to work through the local level to the regional level to the national level. And that is not always how ASDA works. You have 3 years total to do all of the things you want to do with ASDA, and then you're moving on to the next organization. So I do think that that's a shift also.
undoubtedly, undoubtedly. You got to take your time, pay your dues, work your way up the ladder, all those things. And I think today's young people are wanting things to move a lot faster and they want more of an opportunity at an earlier stage in their careers. But really interesting to think about all of that and that transition in from student to young adult. Okay, so the name of the show, of course, is Save the Associations. Curious to hear your advice. What do you think should be the top priority, the main focus of associations right now to make sure that they're avoiding things like membership disengagement, decline? What are your thoughts? What should be the thing?
Yeah, I think, and I know everybody says this, but meeting members where they're at. And that's either, from a member benefit standpoint of what the members need, or even just how the members communicate. We, a few years ago, implemented an online community platform and found out that our members really just want to communicate through quick apps like GroupMe or WhatsApp or something like
Hmm.
that, where something that they already have downloaded on their phone that they go to regularly. And so really making the space and, kind of leaning into that and changing our communications to go where they're already going.
Yeah.
I think that that is something that is going to help associations going forward, especially as, the generations, change and the Gen Z do become a bigger part of the regular associations in the future.
Yeah. Kylie, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I wish we had the perfect answer because then we would have the perfect answer and we wouldn't be experiencing this. But definitely agree with meeting members where they're at, that engagement, that kind of, word that we can sometimes not define and are always after or always chasing it. Communications, like we've said. I think that's where the challenge really lies, is figuring out how to meet them where they're at. And part of the beauty of associations is we can try things like developing a platform, and then we also can say that that didn't work and move on and look to the next thing. So I think that's one thing that members don't always know either, right? We can change, and that is part of the beauty of association. So again, with that communication, like letting folks know that something's not quite where it should be. I think associations are looking to figure out then where it should in fact be. So I think that is something that if we could communicate that with our members, it would be so helpful in kind of bridging that gap to what associations can be.
Undoubtedly. Yeah. Well, I like to end these interviews with a little dance because it's a time also to celebrate all that you're doing to create ASDA fever and grow membership and be relevant to Gen Z and try new things and adapt and be nimble and all the things. So we're celebrating. So join me in some dance moves. Yeah. Okay. There you go. We're making it happen.
Yeah.
Thank you for being on the show and for all you do to help save the associations.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for tuning in to Save the Associations, and special thanks to our presenters for sharing their stories and ideas and best practices. This is a critical time for associations right now. It's a time to innovate. It's a time to lead the way, to get comfortable with disruption because we're being disrupted. We need to ensure that we are aligned with and serving our members to the best of our ability. And hopefully you learned some strategies for doing just that today. Save the Associations is brought to you by XYZ University, which is in the process of launching 2 amazing events that I need to tell you about very briefly. The first one is that XYZ University is launching an entirely new division of its company called Membership U. The first platform delivering courses, training, and community and certification entirely for membership professionals. So if you work for an association, you want to learn more about what works with membership and gain more best practices and training, Membership U is for you. Here's more information on how to access Membership U. Also, coming this fall in October in Washington, D.C. is the Next Gen Now Summit. XYZ University has brought together thought leaders from all over, representing all industries, notable individuals who are leading the way. They are disruptors, they are innovators, and they're seeing great results in terms of paving the way for the next generation right now. Here's where to register. You don't want to miss it. The Next Gen Now Summit coming to DC in October. See you there. And once again, thank you for tuning in, and thanks for all you do to help save the associations.